Hello, and welcome to Code Pro, your source for helpful and effective programming tutorials. Today we are going to be continuing to part 3 of the Beginner Swift tutorial series covering functions. So let's go ahead and open up a new Swift iOS playground and start coding. So let's get started with the most basic type of function in Swift, a function that returns void or returns nothing. And it looks like this: func hello world, and we'll print out hello world inside of the function. And we'll go ahead and call it down below like this. And you can see that hello world is printed down below in the console. Now let's try a function that returns a value. So let's try something like func get name. And this function will return a value of string. So we'll specify return type, string, and down below in the function body, we'll have it return the name code pro for the channel. And we'll go ahead and call that down below, print get name. And you can see that the string code pro is printed in the console. In Swift, a function can return more than one value, and this is done using tuples. We can have a function that looks like this: func get employee data, which returns a tuple, and inside of that tuple will contain two values. We'll have a value for an employee number of type integer and employee name of type string. And inside of the function body, we can return two values. In this case, I'll return 1, 2, 3 for the employee number and code pro for the employee name. And we would call that like this: let employee tuple equals get employee data. And then we can print out the employee tuple. And you'll see in the console that 1, 2, 3 and the name code pro are printed out. And if you don't know what a tuple is, it's kind of like a dictionary, kind of like a struct. It's a data type that can hold multiple values, and it's really useful for returning functions that require multiple values to be returned. Now let's take a look at passing parameters to functions. So let's say we have a function func print name like this, and we want to pass a parameter into this function. Well, we can pass an argument parameter, let's call it name and of type string, and we'll print out the name inside of the function, and we'll call it like this: print name. And if you look here, you can see that print name and then the name, so test and test, will be printed out in the console below. Now this is called the argument parameter. However, Swift 3 introduced a new concept of adding argument labels to functions. So an argument label might look something like this. We'll go ahead and change this for this example, but argument label and argument parameter. And I'm going to change this call to print here to print out the parameter itself. And I'm going to change this to print name. And you can see that now instead of the name or the parameter, the argument label is showing up as what we're going to print out or pass into this function. So let's just print code pro, and you can see that code pro will get printed out in the console below. So you might be looking at argument labels and argument parameters and scratching your head and being like, why do I need argument labels? And I'll explain right now why this might be useful for you to use in your code. So let's create another function with multiple parameters. Function print journey. And we're going to go ahead and give it 3 parameters. We'll give it a traveler of type string for a name, and we'll use a argument label for from, and from where? From an origin city of type string for a city name, going to, for the other final parameter or argument label, and we'll put destination city of type string. And we'll go ahead and print this out really fast in the body here. Print, set up our string, traveler, the argument label origin, the argument parameter origin city, and finally the argument parameter destination city. Now this doesn't really look like a whole lot from inside of the function, but the key is when you call the function. So print journey. And if you see right here, now we'll print code pro from, let's say, Chicago going to New York, for example. And that'll print out down below here. The big selling point with argument labels is making the intent of your functions very, very clear. If you look at this function's name, its signature, print journey, traveler, from an origin city going to a destination city. It reads very much like a sentence. Now, calling it down here, print journey traveler from Chicago going to New York, also kind of makes sense too. And what if we wanted to make this even more clear? So instead of traveler, let's say we added an argument label, traveler name, right? So now, if you look here, we'll replace our argument parameter, which is the default, with the argument label that we just added. So now if we look at this, print journey, traveler name, code pro, from Chicago going to New York. It is very, very clear the intent of this function based on how we're using the argument labels in conjunction with the argument parameters. But it's up to you as the programmer to make sure that you are using the labels in a descriptive way that actually makes sense and add clarity to the intent of your function. We can create functions with default parameter values. Let's take a look at that now. Let's create a function, func calculate tax, with a argument label of item cost, an argument parameter of item of type double, and a tax rate of type double equal to 6%, 0.06. And our function is going to return the tax for the item that's passed in. So we will return item, or the argument value, or times tax rate. And let's go ahead and call that down below. Let tax equal calculate tax. And if you can see here, there is no tax rate that we are passing in. Because it's default, it's automatically going to be 6% because we're specifying that in the function signature. So all we need to do is provide a value for the item cost, which in this case, we'll use 100, and we'll print the tax at $6. So that's how we can specify default parameters for functions in Swift. And that wraps up Beginner Swift tutorial number 3. You will find the completed source code available for free on GitHub. The link for that is down below in the description. And make sure to follow CodePro on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Those links are also down below in the description. And if you liked the video, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. The subscribe button should be up here for more future tutorials. Thank you so much for stopping by.